spent $2.4 million on an Emerald Green Rimac just to watch it become the beacon that led a ghost from my girlfriend's past straight to my front door. My name is Mark. I am 52 years old, and I run a private equity firm in Miami that thrives on the philosophy of clinical detachment. In my world, emotions are liabilities, and data is king. I have spent 3 decades navigating the shark-infested waters of high-stakes finance, buying up distressed companies and stripping away the waste until only the profitable core remains. I pride myself on being a man who cannot be fooled. I have stared down CEOs who were hiding billions in debt, and I have spotted the tremor in a negotiator's hand before they even realized they were losing the room. But as the humidity of a Florida December hung heavy over the city, I realized that the most dangerous lie I ever encountered wasn't in a boardroom. It was sitting in the passenger seat of my car. It started 4 months ago on Hinge. I am not usually the type to rely on algorithms for companionship, but the Miami social scene is often a hall of mirrors where everyone is playing a character. I wanted something that felt grounded, and that was when I saw Sarah. She was 38, a landscape architect with a profile that spoke of structure and growth rather than the typical neon-drenched vanity of South Beach. Our first date was at a quiet, high-end lounge in Coral Gables, a place where the wood is dark and the conversations are private. She arrived wearing a silk dress that matched the color of the ocean at dusk. We shared a bottle of vintage Krug, and for the first time in years, I found myself actually listening instead of analyzing. We talked for hours about the geometry of urban spaces and the difficulty of maintaining a sense of self in a city that demands constant reinvention. The chemistry was high voltage, a rare alignment of intellect and physical attraction that made me feel like a younger version of myself. By the time I walked her to her car, I was convinced that this was the beginning of a significant chapter. We set up a second date for the following Tuesday at my penthouse. I had already contacted my personal chef to prepare a tasting menu, and I had a bottle of 1982 Petrus breathing in the decanter. Then, the morning of the date, the first crack appeared. Sarah sent me a long, frantic text claiming her life had suddenly collapsed. She had lost her job, she was struggling with a recurring eating disorder, and she had realized that she was in no position to be dating a man like me. She told me she was checking herself into a residential treatment facility several hours north of the city. She said I was a high-value man and that she didn't want to drag her shadows into my light. As a man who values self-correction and professional help, I respected her decision. I told her I understood, wished her the best on her journey to recovery, and I stepped back. I deleted her number to maintain my own discipline, but I couldn't delete the memory of the way she looked under the dim lights of the lounge. The summer was long and brutally hot. I focused on a massive acquisition in the design district, working 18-hour days to keep my mind off the vacancy in my personal life. I went on other dates, women who were arguably more successful or younger than Sarah, but they felt like placeholders. There was a specific resonance I had shared with her that I couldn't replicate. By the time the Christmas lights started appearing on the palm trees of Brickell Avenue, I found myself holding 2 tickets to a concert for a band she had introduced me to during our first meeting. It was a whim, a momentary lapse in my usual calculated behavior, but I reached out. I didn't expect a reply, but she called me 10 minutes later. Her voice was thin, almost fragile, but the warmth was still there. She told me she was still in the facility, a 2.5-hour drive from Miami. She thanked me for thinking of her, and then, with a hesitation that I now recognize as a masterfully crafted hook, she asked if I would come visit her. She warned me that she had been in contact with her ex, a man named Dave, and she wasn't sure where that situation was headed. She even sent me $50 for gas money via an app, a gesture that was objectively unnecessary given my net worth, but it served its purpose. It made her seem honest, vulnerable, and fiercely independent. I took the Rimac. I wanted the long drive to clear my head, to feel the silent, terrifying power of the electric motors as I carved through the Florida Turnpike. The car is finished in a custom emerald green carbon fiber, a shade so deep it looks black until the sun hits it, and then it glows like a predatory eye. I pulled into the parking lot of the treatment facility, and the car looked like an alien craft amongst the beige sedans of the staff.
Seeing Sarah again was like a physical jolt. She was thinner, her skin pale from months indoors, but the spark in her eyes was magnified. We spent the afternoon walking the manicured perimeter of the facility. She told me the story of Dave, a controlling, manipulative alcoholic who had spent years eroding her self-esteem. She told me that her time in rehab had finally given her the strength to see him for what he was. She said she was cutting him out of her life for good. She told me she was being released in 2 weeks and was moving to a new apartment in Brickell, just blocks from my office. I felt a surge of protective instinct, a feeling I usually reserve for my investments, but this felt different. It felt like I was helping a survivor. The next week was a blur of constant communication. She sent me pictures of her drawings, intricate, soulful sketches that seemed to prove she was doing the hard work of recovery. She sent me songs that reminded us of us. We talked every night until the early hours of the morning. I was down bad, as my younger associates say, but I told myself I was simply being supportive. I drove up again the following Saturday, and this time the visit was more intimate. We sat under a heavy wool blanket on a hill overlooking a lake, the December air actually feeling cool enough to justify the closeness. She looked me in the eye and told me that her situation with Dave was officially over. We made elaborate plans for our first real Christmas together in Miami, dinner at the most exclusive restaurant in the city, a private boat tour of the bay to see the holiday lights, and a quiet morning in the penthouse. We ended the night with a kiss that felt like a contract, a promise of a new beginning. Another week of intense, constant contact passed. I had already made the reservations and brought a piece of jewelry that I planned to give her on her first night back in the city. Then came the Monday she was supposed to be released. She texted me early in the morning to confirm our plans for Tuesday. I had the Rimac detailed, the emerald paint polished to a mirror shine. I was ready. But on Tuesday afternoon, the silence from her end became deafening. When the text finally arrived, it wasn't the message I expected. She said her eating disorder was flaring up again, that she was having a rough time, and that she couldn't handle the pressure of dating right now. Then came the blow that felt like a calculated strike to the throat. She said that Dave was being obsessed with her, and it wasn't fair to put me in the middle of it. She told me not to respond to her or to any text that came from her number. She said please in a way that didn't sound like a request. It sounded like a warning from someone who was being watched. I sat in my office, the Miami skyline glittering mockingly outside my window. I am a man who understands when a deal has gone toxic, and every instinct I possessed told me that I was being pushed away not for my protection, but to clear the stage for another player. I sent a final, professional reply. If the ex is still in the picture, I won't wait around. I wish you the best with your recovery. I thought that was the end of the narrative. I thought I had simply made a bad investment in a broken person. I was wrong. 3 days later, on a Thursday morning, a text from an unknown number appeared on my screen. It read, "Hey, I noticed a guy in an emerald green car visited Sarah at the facility a few times, and I just want to know if anything happened between you guys. Not trying to start drama, just want the truth. This is Dave." The message from Dave sat on my screen like a glitch in a high-frequency trading algorithm. It was a cold, hard piece of data that confirmed what my instincts had been whispering since Tuesday. I didn't feel the sudden rush of blood or the shaking hands that a younger, less experienced man might feel. Instead, I felt a familiar, icy clarity. This was the same feeling I got when I realized a partner was skimming off the top of a deal, or when a merger was being sabotaged from the inside. I sat in my office, the sunlight reflecting off the emerald green hood of the Rimac Nevera parked below, and I began to deconstruct the situation with surgical precision. The first thing I analyzed was the sheer level of surveillance required for Dave to send that text. For him to know about the emerald green car, he had to have been physically present at the facility. He wasn't just a controlling ex who called too much. He was a predator who had been stalking the perimeter. But Rimac is not a subtle vehicle. It is a $2.4 million statement of intent. In a parking lot full of standard SUVs and staff sedans, that emerald green carbon fiber stood out like a beacon. Dave must have been sitting in his car, perhaps for hours, watching the entrance. He had seen me arrive. He had seen me walk with Sarah. He had probably seen us under that blanket on the hill. Then there was the matter of my phone number. I had signed the visitor logs at the facility, but I hadn't left my number there. To get my digits, Dave had to have gained access to Sarah's phone. This meant that while she was telling me she was cutting him out, he was close enough to her to be scrolling through her private messages. He had likely waited until she was asleep or in the shower, or perhaps she had simply handed him the phone in a moment of weakness. He had seen my name. He had seen the songs she sent me. He had seen the pictures of the drawings she claimed were only for me. The realization hit me that Sarah's frantic text on Tuesday, the one telling me never to contact her again, wasn't an act of self-preservation or a symptom of her recovery. It was a tactical maneuver. She was in the room with him. She could feel the heat of his suspicion, and she knew that if my name popped up on her screen one more time, the fragile house of cards she was building would collapse. She wasn't trying to protect me from Dave. She was trying to protect her access to both of us. She wanted the stability and history of her ex and the luxury and excitement of the man in the Emerald hypercar. She was playing a double game in a league she wasn't equipped for. I looked at the text again. Not trying to start drama, just want the truth. It was the plea of a man who was drowning in a sea of lies and was looking for a life raft. He sounded exhausted. Everything she had told me about him, that he was a controlling alcoholic, might have been true, but it was also the perfect cover. By painting him the villain, she made herself the victim, and she knew that a man of my stature has a natural impulse to protect the vulnerable. She had used my own values against me. She had turned my success and my empathy into a weapon she could use to keep me at a distance while she figured out which life she wanted to lead. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Here I was, a man who could move markets with a single phone call, being used as a pawn by a woman in a rehab facility and a guy who spent his days flipping through visitor logs. Dave had literally gone to the front desk and demanded to see who was visiting his wife or girlfriend. I still didn't know their true status, and he had written down the descriptions of the cars. He was so tweaked, as she had put it, that he was playing private investigator. But as I sat there, I realized he wasn't the enemy. He was just the mirror. He was the physical evidence of the life she refused to leave behind. I thought about the money. I thought about the $50 she sent me for gas. At the time, I thought it was a sweet, independent gesture. Now I saw it for what it was, a cheap buy-in to a high-stakes lie. It was a way to make me feel like I wasn't just another guy paying for her attention. It was a way to build trust quickly so she could extract more later. The jewelry I had bought for our Christmas dinner sat in my desk drawer, a $10,000 reminder that even the best analysts can be blinded by a well-told story. I didn't reply to Dave. A man in my position doesn't engage in the petty drama of a failing relationship. If he wanted the truth, he could find it in the silence I was about to give him. Let him ruminate on the image of the Emerald Rimac. Let him wonder what happened during those long walks on the grounds. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a confrontation, and I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a confession. In the world of private equity, when an asset is this toxic, you don't try to fix it, you cut your losses and you walk away. I stood up and looked out at the Miami skyline, the Christmas lights of the city flickering like 1,000 tiny deceptions. The heat was rising from the pavement, shimmering over the hood of my car. I was the other guy, a role I never thought I'd play, but I was also the only person in this triangle with the power to end the game. Sarah had tried to erase me to save herself, and Dave was trying to find me to save his sanity. Neither of them realized that I had already moved on to the next deal.
I sat in the heavy silence of my office for a long time after that text from Dave arrived, watching the shadow of a palm tree stretch across the floor like a dark finger pointing at the Emerald Rimac in the lot below. Most men would have felt the urge to strike back, to fire off a message detailing every intimate moment and every dollar spent on that woman, but I am not most men. I understood that Dave's message wasn't just a request for the truth. It was a symptom of a man who had already lost his mind to the chaos Sarah provided. He had spent his time digging through visitor logs at a treatment facility, hunting for a ghost in a green car because he couldn't find a single shred of honesty in the eyes of the woman he was living with. I realized then that Dave and I were both dealing with a professional. Sarah had managed to keep a man of my experience and a man of his obsession in two completely separate orbits until the sheer gravitational pull of her lies brought us into a final, unavoidable collision course. I didn't respond to Dave, and I never will. Business has taught me that silence is often the most expensive commodity you can own, and I wasn't about to give mine away for free to a man who was already spiraling into his own personalized hell. I looked at the logistics of the visitor logs again. Dave must have been watching that facility like a hawk, literally flipping through the physical books to find out who was visiting her. This meant that even while Sarah was calling me every night, sending me drawings and telling me she was starting a new life with me in Brickell, Dave was right there, breathing down her neck. She had been living a double life in the most confined space imaginable, a residential rehab center. It takes a specific kind of talent to juggle a millionaire in a hypercar and a controlling ex-husband in the same parking lot, and for a moment I almost admired the sheer audacity of the play. I began to see the tactical brilliance in her final text. She had asked me never to respond to her again because she knew Dave had finally cracked her phone. She had deleted every single text between us, scrubbed our history, and likely changed my name in her contacts to something innocuous before Dave could see it. Her request for silence wasn't about her health or her eating disorder flaring up. It was a desperate attempt to stop my name from popping up on her screen while Dave was holding the device in his hand. She was trying to scrub me from her existence to save her skin with a man she claimed she was leaving. She was using my dignity as a shield for her own cowardice. Honestly, they both seemed like complete assholes to me in that moment. Sarah was a manipulator who used her recovery as a stage for a romantic drama, and Dave was a man so broken by her games that he had turned into a low-rent private investigator. I realized what a complete mess the whole situation truly was. I had no idea if Dave was actually an ex, or if they were just taking a break, or if they had been together every single night while I was driving up there to support her. It didn't matter anymore. Whether it was a marriage, a long-term relationship, or a toxic cycle they couldn't break, I was the outsider who had accidentally bought a front-row seat to their wreckage. I had been the distraction, the backup plan, the shiny emerald escape route that she wasn't quite brave enough to take. I stood up, picked up my keys, and walked out of the office. The air in Miami was thick with the scent of salt and the heavy, humid heat of a Florida Christmas as I stepped out into the sun. The Emerald Rimac was waiting for me, its carbon fiber skin glowing under the holiday lights of the city. I felt a strange sense of gratitude for the whole ordeal. Most men my age lose half their net worth in a decade of their lives to a woman like Sarah. I lost a few weekends, some gas money I didn't need, and the cost of a concert ticket. It was a cheap price to pay for a reminder that even the most high-value man can be blinded if he lets his guard down for a pretty face and a sad story. I drove south toward the Keys, the silent power of the Rimac pinning me into the leather seat as I accelerated away from the city. I watched the Christmas lights of Miami fade in the rearview mirror, shrinking until they were nothing but tiny sparks against the dark horizon. I thought about the jewelry I had bought her. The diamonds are still in my desk drawer. I'd probably give them to my sister or just sell them and put the money back into the firm. I wasn't going to let a single trace of Sarah remain in my physical or mental space. I had escaped relatively unscathed, and I knew it could have gone so much worse had I actually moved her into that apartment in Brickell and let her into my inner circle.
As I crossed the 7-mile bridge, the ocean stretching out into the darkness on both sides, I realized that I had gotten exactly what I needed. I got a good story, a clean break, and the absolute certainty that I am better off alone than in the middle of someone else's madness. I let Dave have his rumination and his visitor logs. I let Sarah have her obsessed ex and her drawings. I have the emerald car, the Miami skyline, and a peace of mind that no amount of money can buy. Dave wanted the truth, but the truth is that he and Sarah deserve each other. They are two people bound together by lies and surveillance, while I am 52 years old, in the prime of my life, and the road ahead of me is perfectly clear.